If you place your limited company into insolvency, there is a set of problems coming your way that I don't think anyone has explained to you. And here's what makes them so dangerous. Most of these problems, they don't feel like problems while they're happening. It's only later down the line that they come back and bite you on the backside. Now, these problems can make people bankrupt and sometimes they can lose their homes. And there is one problem in particular that I want you to watch for, that most directors like you do completely innocently. Money that you're just taking out of the company without a second thought. And that money quietly builds into a personal debt that you've never seen coming. And I'm going to show you exactly what it is in a few minutes. Now, underneath all of these problems, there is a clock that's running. And the moment that the clock runs out, you lose control, and I promise you it's going to hurt. So by the end of the video, you're going to understand exactly what these problems are in plain English and what you can do about each one of them while you've still got time. So let me start with a problem that sits underneath every other problem in this video, and almost no director knows it's happened to them. Now, when you set up a limited company, the job is fairly simple. Run the business for the benefit of the shareholders. That's normally you. You make decisions that are good for you, good for the company, good for the owners. But the day that your company becomes insolvent, now what is insolvency? It's you can't pay your debts when they fall due, your liabilities are more than your assets. So let's say you can't pay HMRC this month, you're insolvent. If you're putting off paying suppliers, it's a sign that you're insolvent. Now, you've got to be aware when insolvency might be likely. Now, that's important, not certain, but if insolvency is likely, so like let's say you know there's a problem coming down the line, it's just not crystallized yet. Your duty flips, like literally overnight. It stops being about the shareholders. Your duty is now to your creditors, so the people and companies that your company owes money to. From the moment that you become insolvent, or insolvency could be probable, the law says you've got to act in the best interest of your creditors. Now, most directors I speak to have never been told this. So they literally carry on making decisions the way they've always made them. Like I spoke to a director a while back. Now, he'd spent the last 6 months of his company's life doing what he thought was the responsible thing. So he was paying suppliers he had good relationships with, he was getting his personally guaranteed loans down, and he was continuing to draw something called a dividend, even though he wasn't making a profit anymore. Now, every single one of these decisions felt right to him. Now, I've worked with thousands of directors over the years, and I think I'm a fairly good judge of character. This guy was an honest, hard-working man. But when the insolvency practitioner came in and he looked back over the last 6 months, the question wasn't, did it feel right? The question was these payments that you made, did they treat all the creditors fairly? And it's against that test, some of these decisions look very different, and it created some personal liability for the director that could have been avoided. Now, the lesson's this: the moment your company becomes insolvent, your job changes overnight. You're no longer running the business for you. You've got to put your creditors' interests first. And every decision you make from that point gets judged against that standard. And sadly, not knowing that's what you're meant to do isn't a defence. And I want you to hold on to that, because it's about to explain of what comes next. Now, that flipping your duty is the backdrop. But the first problem that actually lands on you financially is something you need to be prepared for and have a plan to deal with. Now, over the life of your business, you've probably signed more personal guarantees than you remember. Could be bank loans, overdrafts, credit cards, the lease on your building, the finance on your vans, that trade supplier that wanted a guarantee before they give you any credit. And each one of them at the time, it feels like a small thing, bit of a formality, a box to tick to get the deal done. You sign it, you file it, and you forget about it. Now, for years, none of the PGs mattered, because the company were paying its bills, nobody ever come calling. But here's the problem: A personal guarantee means that if the company can't pay, you are meant to pay personally. Now, up until the point where your company's starting to struggle, these debts have lived inside the company and they're behind something called the shield of limited liability. But if your company enters in insolvency, be it administration, be it liquidation, or even in a CVA, every guarantee you've signed can reach straight through that shield and land on your toes. Now, I sat with a director last year who, until the conversation with me, genuinely couldn't have told you what his exposure to PG was. He thought he may have PG'd the bank loan. He thought in total it were about 60 grand. So we went through it. We got him to speak to all his creditors and ask for the original paperwork. So the loan, the overdraft, the lease, there was 2 suppliers he'd PG'd. By the time we added it up, he was on the hook for over £200,000. Now the lesson's this: make sure you understand your PG situation at all times. Every time you sign one, file it and just put it on a spreadsheet. So you can always, at a moment's notice, understand what your total PG exposure is. And if your business is headed into insolvency, all these PGs are going to crystallise and they're going to come for you personally. You've got to have a plan for when they do. Now, the good news is in most cases, you'll easily be able to restructure the PGs over a longer period. Let's say your company's going into liquidation or administration. You've got 100 grand's worth of PGs that have come at you. Most of those PGs will be happy to set up another payment plan with you, okay? Sometimes in a longer period of time, sometimes you can cap the interest, okay? They want to hear sensible proposals because most of them don't want to start legal action against you. They want to get their money the cheapest and easiest way. Now, there's another option that you might be able to do if you can get your hands on some money, and it's called a full and final settlement. I'll give you an example. We were supporting a director last year. He owed Iwaka 145,000 quid. His father-in-law lent him 50 grand and he got it settled at 50,000, full and final. The rest of it was written off. Now, if you're worried about PGs, obviously I've done podcasts with a PG specialist. Might be an idea to go and have a look at that. And again, we can talk to you about your PGs. Now, the thing is with PGs, at least they are debts that you agreed to carry. You might have forgot agreeing to carry them, but you did agree to it at some point. The next one's different because this is the one that I told you about at the start. It's the personal debt you build up completely innocently without ever signing a thing. And a lot of people never see it until it's far too late. And that's the overdrawn director's loan account. This is the situation I see more than almost any other. Director needs cash, company has the cash, the director takes it. Maybe it's a couple of grand for a trip, maybe it's 10 grand to clear some personal credit cards, maybe, it's a slow stretch, but you've still got to take a few thousand here and there to keep the house going. Rent, mortgage, food, kids' school shoes, nothing dodgy, nothing planned. It's just your company. It's got some money in it, you need some money, you take the money. But you don't run it through payroll. And because the company's struggling, your accountant isn't able to declare it as a dividend. So it sits in something called a director's loan account. And what that means in plain English is the company's lent you some money and you owe the company back. And while everything's fine, nobody really thinks about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, if your loan account's over £10,000 and it isn't paid back, I think 9 months and 1 day at a year end, you get absolutely walloped with something called S455 tax, which is 33.75% of the outstanding balance. But other than that, you might not give it much thought. But if your company ends up in insolvency, administration or liquidation, that overdrawn loan account becomes one of the most painful problems you have got to deal with. Because when an insolvency practitioner is appointed, one of the very first things they look at is the director's loan account. And if it's overdrawn, you owe the company the money. That money is an asset that sits on the company's balance sheet, and it's the insolvency practitioner's legal duty to try and recover it from you personally. And like this happens literally every week. We hear of a director who's placed the company into a liquidation thinking the worst was behind them, only to get a letter from the insolvency practitioner 3 months later demanding that they repay 40, 50, 60,000 pounds. In some cases, it's a lot more. Now, I want to say something here that I don't say very often. But when I went through my company insolvency, the bit that hit me the hardest wasn't actually the insolvency. You know, it wasn't the creditors meeting, it wasn't the public stuff. It was the moment that I realised that money I'd taken out of my company completely innocently, if not a bit naively. I didn't have a bad intention. It was now a debt that I owed the company. Okay? And the worst thing was no one ever told me about it until it was too late. And that has been my bugbear in this industry for years and years. And you know what? I think these videos have actually changed how some insolvency practitioners behave, but not all of them. If anything I've said to you so far is pretty conscious and thought, you know what? I want to talk to them because we offer free and independent advice. We've got like 750 5-star reviews on Trustpilot, more than anyone else in my industry by a country mile. Go to the description. At the top, there is a link. Click the link, put your details in. One of my team will call you today. If you don't want to talk to someone yet, but you're thinking, I need to find out more about insolvency, the link underneath it is a free guide to insolvency. I still want your email address, but if you give me your email address, I'll send you the guide straight away. Now, the problem is some firms don't mention this. Within 2 minutes of talking to you and having a look on Companies House, me and my team have got a good idea if you've got a director's loan account or not. Now, the lesson's this. If you've been taking money out of the company that hasn't been processed through payroll, or it's not a formal dividend, your director's loan account is almost certainly overdrawn. And that is a personal debt that's got your name on it, whether you can see it or not. So you need to get this figure organised, right? Today, okay? Because you can't deal with a problem that you don't know the size of. And what I would start with, right? If you've got zero QuickBooks free agent, pull off a trial balance. And on that balance, you'll get a line in the trial balance that basically says whether you've got an overdrawn director's loan account or not. It might be in the asset section, the balance, or it might be in the debtor section. Now, and by the way, your software needs to be up to date for this to have any reliability. If you don't have a software at all, or your software is not up to date, you're going to have to go back to your last set of filed accounts, which I hate doing, but you're going to have a starting point. Now, in your last set of accounts, in the asset section or the debtor section, there will be a line that says director's loan account or director's drawings, or it might be in a line that says other debtors, okay? But that figure will basically tell you where your director's loan account was at some date in the past. The problem with this method is your accounts will a day in the past. They were literally a snapshot of your business at some day in the past. So it's almost certainly changed. And if you've taken money from the company that isn't payroll since these last set of accounts, your director's loan account has increased, unless you've made payments back into the company. Now, we'll help you do that at Director First. If you speak to us, we'll help you understand what your position is. And once you understand what your director's loan account number is, we can start to put together a plan of how it might be dealt with by an insolvency practitioner in an insolvency scenario. Because insolvency practitioners have got the discretion to offer a settlement, basically accept a settlement when they're chasing a director's loan account, as long as that settlement is in the best interests of creditors and is a better realisation than making a director bankrupt. Now, I don't want to scare you with the word bankruptcy, but this is going to help you in this scenario. Listen, if you're in rented accommodation, you've got very little disposable income, no realisable assets, there is a good chance your director's loan account will either be written off entirely by the IP or they'll accept a really small settlement. Because the insolvency practitioner can't justify spending money on legal costs, chasing a director when there's no hope of recovery at the end. Now, if you've got a house with lots of equity in, I mean, you might have a mortgage, you might be married, but if you've got substantial equity in your house, this can become a real problem, and you've got to try and protect it. And the way to do this is to understand what that insolvency practitioner is likely to realise if they made you bankrupt. Now, what most of you don't really understand is bankruptcy is very risky, it's very expensive, and it's very drawn out. To make someone bankrupt and actually force them to sell the home could be 4 years before something goes back to creditors. And the key thing is an insolvency practitioner would have to fund the legal costs up until that point. And on that basis, most insolvency practitioners would accept a settlement as long as that realisation is better than what they get in a bankruptcy. And that's the type of thing that we help you with. We sort of like go through what you own, what you owe, what your personal situation is from a net worth position, and actually work out what the insolvency practitioner would get in a bankruptcy. And that's where we sort of make an offer of settlement. Now, please be aware, an insolvency practitioner can't make a formal decision on settling an overdrawn loan account until they've been appointed. But we've been doing this a long, long time. And if you tell us everything, we can give you a good idea of what a settlement would look like up front. Now, the next problem is when I see catch out directors who are actually trying to do the right thing. Again, people with good intentions. Because some of the most well-meaning decisions that you make in the final months can be unwound completely and then held against you. And I'll tell you exactly how this one played out. So there was a director, let's call him Tom, okay? I spoke to him a few months ago. He ran a fit out business, been going years, good reputation, a lot of people employed. He had a big customer that went under, owing him hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it basically was a hole that he was never going to be able to climb out again. Now, in the final 6 months before he went into liquidation, he did what most decent people do. He tried to look after the people who'd looked after him for years. His dad had lent him 30 grand a few months previously. And in those final few months when money still come in, he basically paid his dad back. Okay, fair enough, isn't it? He couldn't stand the thought of his old man losing out. So he did what he thought was the honourable thing. And he also had one supplier, small family firm that he worked with for years. And he knew if he didn't pay them, it'd really hurt him. So he made sure that they got paid in full ahead of everybody else. Now, most of these decisions come from a good place, but they both landed him in trouble because there's a thing in insolvency called a preference. And in plain English, a preference is when on the run up to insolvency, okay, you pay a creditor in a way that puts them in a better position than any others. Remember what we said right at the start. Once you're insolvent, your duty is to all your creditors as a whole. So if an insolvency practitioner finds a preference, and remember that's what they're trained to do, they can reverse it and they can go after the person or company who got paid, or they can come to you and demand the money back from you personally. So the insolvency practitioner went to Tom's dad, asked him to pay the money back. He's an 80-year-old bloke who'd been trying to pay his son, and now he had to repay the money that he probably already spent. And the payments to the favourite supplier, okay, they tried to get unwound, okay, but I think the insolvency practitioner found it easier to make Tom, the director, liable for them. So these decisions, they didn't have to be made. Like, Tom never took advice until the very end. But for you, if you're paying connected parties, like family ahead of other creditors in the run-up to insolvency, this is the sort of thing that's going to get you criticised. And there's another kind of related trap here, and it's called a transaction under value. And again, that's where in the period running up to insolvency, you sell or transfer company assets for less than they're worth. So basically, selling a van that's worth 15 grand to a mate for £1,000. If you move assets to another company, okay, or other people, those transfers can be reversed in the same way, okay? So again, if you are looking at transferring stuff out of the business, make sure you get an independent valuation done. But the lesson's this: in the months before insolvency, who you pay matters just as much as whether you pay them. And I get it, the instinct's to look after people closest to you. But in these scenarios, it can be reversed and it can actually be held against you. So before you make any payments or you sell any assets out of the company, when you know the company's in real trouble, you've got to take advice. Now, there are some exceptions. I spoke to a builder today. He's basically got to release £20,000 to a supplier. And he says, Chris, can I do it? And I asked the question, what does that £20,000 bring into the company? And it brings in 50,000. So that 50,000 that's going to come into the pot will be for the benefit of all creditors. And obviously that £20,000 payment can be made because it is in the interest of the creditors as a whole. Okay. So again, what you're going to do here is you've got to seek advice. You've got to talk things through before you do them. Now, before you make any decisions, okay, you've got to think to yourself, listen, if I do this, is it going to come and bite me down the line? Because if you make a decision that is going to bite you down the line, it's going to be really hard to unwind that decision. Now, I want to come to the last thing, and this is the thing that ties the whole video together. Because everything I've shown you so far, the guarantees, the loan accounts, payments, there's something you can do about all of it. But it's only as long as that clock that I mentioned at the start is still running. And I need you to understand what happens the moment that clock stops. Now, the thing that decides everything with every problem I've talked about today is you've got power over the outcome, more than you think. But it's only while these decisions are yours to make still, and they're not yours to make forever. The clock that I told you about at the start, while your company's still trading, while you've still got options, you are the one in the driving seat. You can take advice. You can look at restructuring the business. You can look at informal payment plans with your creditors. You can look at a controlled voluntary process like liquidation or administration. And you've got a say in how all of it plays out. You can get ahead of your personal guarantees. You can understand your director's loan account. And you sort of shape what happens next. But if you do nothing, if you bury your head and you hope it goes away, eventually a creditor's going to lose patience and they're going to take the decision out of your hands. And the way they do that is something called a winding up petition. And a creditor, it's very often HMRC. They basically goes to court and say, listen, we can't get the money back off this company. We want you to wind it up. And if that succeeds, the court orders your company be shut down. And you get something called the official receiver. And from that moment, you've got no control whatsoever. You don't choose what happens. You don't choose who's appointed. You don't choose the timing. It's all taken away from you. And in almost every case I have ever seen, a director who gets forced into a compulsory winding up ends up in a worse position than a director who acted while the choice was still theirs. First thing that's going to be questioned is your conduct. The official receiver is going to say, well, you should have taken steps to close the company months ago when you become insolvent. Therefore, I'm going to disqualify you because I don't think you're fit to become a director. That happens all the time. They're also going to look at directors' loan accounts like an insolvency practitioner would. But I don't think there's any commerciality about the official receiver. Whereas with an insolvency practitioner, I think you can sort of get a deal done with them based on getting a better realisation than bankruptcy. I've seen directors get wound up and the official receiver is chasing them for years and years. And they're probably spending tens of thousands of pounds worth of man hours to make recoveries of, next to nothing. I've watched it happen. So if a director is watching this, you've got the problems that I've described today, got to pick the phone up. And even if it's not to me, you've got to pick up the phone to someone. Because if you wait and wait, one morning a petition's going to land, your bank account's going to get frozen. And suddenly, none of it's your decision anymore. The window doesn't slam shut overnight. It's been closing slowly for the whole time. but you just didn't know that there was a clock there. You couldn't hear it. And the lesson's this: every single problem in this video gets more manageable the earlier you face it, and the more damaging the longer you leave it. Acting early isn't about being brave, it's about keeping the decisions in your own hands instead of handing them to a court who owe you nothing. The directors who come through this are not the ones who waited to see what happens. They're the ones who moved while moving was still their choice to make. Now, I hope you found the video useful. If you've got any comments, please put them down. I'll respond to them personally. Book a call if you want to speak to us. And if you want to find out more about what you do if a winding up petition is being threatened or is landed on your door, go and watch that video now about winding up petitions. Chris Worden, thanks for your time.